The cheap plastic key card to our dorm was still warm from my hand when I walked in and saw a stranger's hoodie hanging on my chair, like he owned the place. And I stayed quiet even though something in me cracked, because why was it there again? And why did my roommate look up at me like I was the one intruding? My name is Magnolia. I'm 19, a first-year student, and I work part-time at the campus. Coffee bar to cover the little things my scholarship does not. When I moved into Hawthorne Hall, I expected the usual roommate stuff. Different sleep schedules, someone's alarm going off too early, the occasional passive-aggressive sigh. I did not expect a third person to quietly move into our room without ever asking me if I was okay with it. My roommate's name was Holland. She was pretty in that effortless way, like she could roll out of bed and still look like she belonged in a dorm tour brochure. We got along fine at first. Not friends, but polite. We split the mini fridge space. We took turns taking out trash. We did the little courtesy things that keep two strangers from becoming enemies. Then she met him. His name was Rhodes. He was 20, a little older, and he had that confident, lazy smile that makes you feel like you're being invited into a joke you do not understand. The first time he came over, I did not care. Friday night, a movie, whispering. He left before midnight. Normal. But normal has a way of changing when you are trying to be the easy roommate. He started coming over more. First a couple nights a week, then every other night. Then it felt like he was just there, like the room had shifted and made space for him. And I was the one who had to fold myself smaller to fit. I would wake up and hear the soft rustle of his shoes by the bed. I would come back from class and find him sprawled across Holland's side like a cat, using her pillow, her blanket, my air. And every time I hesitated, every time I opened my mouth to say, hey, can we talk about this? I could feel the pressure in my chest that came from not wanting to be labeled the dorm villain, the snitch, the girl who ruins things. Holland always had an explanation ready. He's going through a rough patch. His roommates are toxic. He feels safer here. He makes me feel safe. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself if I acted calm, it would calm down. But it didn't. It got worse in small ways first. The kind of small that makes you second guess your own reaction. Rhodes would whisper, laugh into his phone at night, the sound sliding under my pillow like a mosquito you cannot catch. He would say, oh my bad, in this fake, gentle voice when I asked for quiet. Then continue 5 minutes later, like my request had evaporated. He started using things that were not his. I came back one afternoon and my desk chair was on Holland's side. My phone charger was unplugged and his was plugged in. My laptop stand, the one my dad bought me before he left town for work, was holding up Rhodes's phone like a little throne. I stared at my charger for a long time because my name was on it, literally. A sticker with Magnolia, written in my messy handwriting. It was not subtle. It was not confusing. When I brought it up, Holland's face tightened. She said he didn't know it was yours. It was like being slapped softly. Not enough to bruise, but enough to make you realize someone thinks you will accept anything if it is delivered sweetly. I started changing clothes in the bathroom. I started timing showers for when Rhodes went to grab food. I started keeping my back to the wall when he was in the room because the feeling of being watched sat on my skin like static. And the wild part is, he rarely even looked at me directly. He didn't need to. The message was in how comfortable he was. How he walked around like this was his space, and I was the guest. The first time I truly got scared was a Tuesday night. I remember because I had an early lab the next morning and I had already laid out my clothes so I could move quietly. I put in earbuds, got into bed, and tried to shut the day off. At first, their voices were low, the kind of low that means they know someone else is in the room and they do not care enough to stop. Then Holland said something sharp. Rhodes snapped back. The air changed. I could feel it, like the temperature dropped in the room. I turned my face into my pillow and told myself to ignore it. Couples argue. People have stress, not my business. But then Rhodes raised his voice, not yelling yet, but close. And Holland's voice rose too, words tumbling into each other. I could hear my own heartbeat over my earbuds. Then he slammed our door. Not a normal slam, not an oops, the door swung too hard slam. This was a slam that made the wall vibrate. The little command hooks over my desk rattled. My stomach did that horrible sinking thing. Like my body knew before my brain did that this was a line. I sat up, frozen, and Holland looked at me with this weird expression, like she wanted me to be on her side, and also like she wanted me to pretend it was not happening. Rhodes went quiet for a second, and I heard him crying, not soft crying, loud, choking sobs. He started saying he had nowhere else, that everyone always leaves him, that he was trying, that he was sorry. And then Holland turned her head toward me like I was supposed to fix it, like I was supposed to tell him it was okay, like I was supposed to sacrifice my comfort so he could feel held. I said nothing. I could not. My throat had closed up and my brain was doing that thing where it runs through worst case scenarios lightning fast. He had nowhere else. So what did that mean for me? The next morning, I found my childhood memory box on the floor. It was a small cardboard box I kept under my bed, taped shut, full of photos and letters and tiny pieces of home. Nothing expensive. Nothing anyone would steal for money. Just mine, private, the kind of stuff that makes you feel like you still exist outside this place. The tape was peeled back. The lid was open. My photos were slightly out of order, like someone had touched them and tried to put them back quickly. I stared at it, feeling this cold creep up my spine, because I knew I left it closed. I knew it. When I asked Holland, she swore she did not touch it. Then she looked away when she said it, and something about that made my chest burn. Rhodes was sitting on her bed, scrolling on his phone like nothing in the world could bother him. I wanted to accuse him. I wanted to point at his backpack and demand he empty it. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I took a slow breath. I put the photos back. I taped the box shut again, carefully, like I was sealing my own anger inside it. I said, okay, good to know. And that was when I decided I was done being loud. If you're still listening, quick real life pause. Tell me your city and state or your country and your first name. Hit like and subscribe too. All right, now let me take you back, because Because the truth is, I didn't go to the RA immediately. I didn't report him the day I found my charger unplugged. I didn't report him when he started sleeping over. I tried to solve it like an adult because I wanted to believe Holland and I could handle it between us. The first time I asked her directly, I kept my voice gentle. I said, hey, can we talk about guest stuff? Housing has rules and I'm feeling crowded. Holland smiled like she was embarrassed for me. She said, totally, you're right. I'll make sure he's not here as much. You won't even notice. Rhodes was there the next morning. The second time I asked, I got more specific. I said I needed heads up. I said I needed nights where I could have the room to myself. I said I needed him to stop touching my things. Holland's smile didn't reach her eyes. She said, you're being dramatic. He's not doing anything to you. He's just existing. That phrase lodged in my head. Just existing. Like I was being unreasonable for wanting to feel safe in the place I slept. After the memory box incident, I stopped talking and started watching. I kept my key card in my pocket instead of leaving it on my desk. I took photos of how my side of the room looked before I went to class. Just quick, casual pictures like I was taking a snapshot of my outfit. I wrote down the nights Rhodes stayed over in my notes app because the housing contract was clear and I suddenly cared about details the way you care when you know you're being pushed into a corner. I stopped leaving my toiletries on the sink shelf. I stopped leaving my laundry bag open. I stopped assuming my privacy was obvious. Rhodes noticed the change. He started being nicer in that calculated way. He would say good morning. He would offer me a chip from a bag he bought with Holland's money. He would call me roommate in this friendly voice that made my skin crawl. One night, while Holland was in the shower, he leaned back in her desk chair and said, you're pretty quiet. You don't like me, huh? I kept my face blank. I said, I'm focused on school. He smiled like he loved that answer, like it made him feel powerful. Then he said, don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. I felt my stomach turn, but I didn't let it show. I nodded. I said, okay, and I watched him carefully. 2 days later, I came back from my shift at the coffee bar and the room was empty. No Holland, no Rhodes. The silence felt so good I almost cried. Then I noticed something. My desk drawer was open, just a crack, like someone had closed it in a hurry and missed the latch. I walked over slowly, my hands suddenly cold. Inside, my little folder of housing paperwork was shifted, not taken, just moved, like someone had flipped through it. And sitting on top, like a little warning, was the guest policy printout I had taped inside for myself. I hadn't left it there. I stood there for a long time, staring at that paper, realizing Rhodes wasn't just careless. He was checking what I knew. And the scariest part was how neatly he'd placed it back, like he wanted me to notice, but he also wanted me to doubt myself. I closed the drawer softly. I sat on my bed. I breathed in and out until my heart stopped racing. Then I opened my notes app and added a new line. Rhodes touched my housing papers, and I finally understood what he was doing. He wasn't begging for space. He was claiming it. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there listening to the building breathe, the radiator ticking like a countdown, and every time footsteps passed in the hallway, I wondered if they were coming for our door. That sounds dramatic, I know, but when you realize someone has been touching your things on purpose, it stops feeling like a roommate problem and starts feeling like a safety problem. By morning, my fear had cooled into something sharper, a plan. At breakfast, I sat alone, stirring powdered eggs until they turned to mush, and I kept replaying Rhodes' smile in my head, not the friendly one, the one he wore when he said he wasn't going anywhere, like he wanted to see what I would do about it. I decided I wouldn't do what he expected. I didn't text Holland to fight. I didn't write a dramatic message. I didn't threaten to report. I did the opposite. I became easy again. When I walked back into the room, Holland was sitting cross-legged on her bed with her laptop, and Rhodes was in my chair like it had always belonged to him. He looked up, waiting for my reaction. I smiled. Not big, not fake cheerful. Just enough to look harmless. Hey, I said, and I put my bag down gently. How's your morning? Rhodes blinked like his brain had to recalibrate. Holland relaxed too, and I saw it. The way her shoulders dropped like she'd been bracing for a fight. They went back to their conversation, and I moved around the room quietly like I'd made peace. Inside, I was counting. I started small. I put a strip of clear tape over the edge of my desk drawer, the kind you can't see unless you're looking for it. If someone opened the drawer, the tape would wrinkle. If someone closed it, it would never sit perfectly again. I did the same thing on my memory box, except I used a tiny piece of tape on the inside fold so it wouldn't be obvious. Then I slid the box back under my bed, and I pushed it far enough that no one would casually grab it without getting on the floor. The next step was my charger. I bought a new one at the campus store with my tip money, the cheapest one I could find, and I left the old one plugged into the wall like bait. Then I wrote my name on the new one too and kept it in my backpack. If Rhodes wanted to keep playing, I'd let him play. I just needed proof, not feelings. For 2 days, nothing happened. Rhodes was still there constantly, still too loud late at night, still showering in our communal bathroom like he lived in the building, still leaving his shoes by the door like he paid for the right to take up space. But my tape didn't wrinkle. I almost started doubting myself, which made me angry all over again. That's the trick, isn't it? They push until you react, and when you calm down, they act normal, and you start wondering if you imagined it. On the third day, I came back from class and the room smelled like cologne and instant noodles. Holland was at the mirror, curling her hair. Rhodes was sitting at my desk again, even though his phone was in his hand and my chair was the only thing he needed. He looked at me and smiled like we were friends. I didn't look at him. I looked at my desk drawer. The tape was wrinkled. My throat went tight, but I kept my expression smooth. I walked over, opened my backpack, and pretended to search for something. Inside my desk drawer, my folder had been moved again. Not stolen, just shifted like someone had flipped through it and put it back. Rhodes said, "You lose something?" "No," I said softly. "Just checking my schedule." He leaned back in my chair and his knee bounced like he was bored. Holland kept curling her hair, pretending not to hear. I went to the bathroom with my backpack and locked myself in a stall even, though no one else was inside. My hands were shaking when I opened my notes app. Tape wrinkled. Drawer opened. Papers moved. I stared at those words and felt something settle in me. This wasn't paranoia. This was pattern. That evening, morning, I did the first thing I'd been avoiding. I went to my resident assistant. Her name was Rue, and she lived 2 doors down. The first time I met her, she'd seemed sweet and slightly awkward, the kind of person who kept emergency snacks in her desk and actually meant it when she said her door was open. I knocked, and when she opened it, I almost backed out. My instinct was still to protect Holland, even after everything. Like I owed her loyalty because we shared a room. But then I thought about my memory box on the floor. I thought about Rhodes's voice in the dark. I thought about the way the walls shook when he slammed our door. I swallowed. Can I talk to you for a second? I asked. Rue stepped aside and let me in. Her room smelled like laundry detergent and peppermint gum. She sat on her desk chair and I stood because sitting felt too vulnerable. I kept my voice calm. That was important. I didn't want to sound hysterical. I didn't want to give anyone an excuse to call it roommate drama. I said, my roommate's boyfriend has been staying over almost every night for weeks. I've asked her to follow the guest rules and she keeps brushing it off. He uses my stuff. He's loud at night. There was an argument that got intense and I'm starting to feel unsafe. Rue's face changed when I said unsafe. She leaned forward. Have you told her directly you're uncomfortable with him being there overnight? She asked. Yes, I said. Multiple times. Rue nodded slowly like she was putting puzzle pieces together. Then she asked, has he ever threatened you? The honest answer was no. Not with words, not directly. But I still heard his voice. Don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. I took a breath and said, not directly. But he's been going through my things. I know it. Rue didn't roll her eyes. She didn't laugh. She didn't ask if I was sure. She said, okay, here's what we can do. She explained the guest policy again. How many nights a week? How many in a row? And what happens when someone is basically living in a dorm they're not assigned to. She told me housing takes it seriously because it becomes a security issue, not just an annoyance. Then she asked me if I wanted her to talk to Holland informally first, or if I wanted to file an official report. My heart pounded. An official report would explode my life. Holland had already warned me. She'd blame me. She'd turn it into betrayal. She'd make the room unbearable. So I chose the quiet route first. Informal, I said. Just reminder of the rules. Rue nodded. She said she'd do it the next day. I walked back to my room with a weird mix of relief and dread, like I'd finally stepped onto a bridge that only goes one way. Rhodes was there, of course. He was lying on Holland's bed, scrolling. Holland sat at her desk with earbuds in. The room felt smaller than ever. I put my backpack away and got into my bed with my laptop, pretending to do homework. Rhodes kept glancing at me like he was measuring my mood. I could feel him trying to figure out what I'd done. That night, Rue knocked on our door. Holland opened it, and her smile was bright and polite in that forced way people get when authority shows up. Rue spoke in a friendly voice. She reminded Holland about the guest policy. She said there had been concerns about overnight stays. She said it needed to be followed moving forward. Holland's eyes flicked to me. Quick, sharp. She said, oh, totally, of course. Sorry if we didn't realize. It won't happen again. Rue thanked her and left. The second the door clicked shut, Holland turned to me. Did you do that? She asked, her voice low. I kept my face neutral. I didn't deny it, but I didn't confess either. I just said I needed help. I've been asking. Holland's jaw tightened. Rhodes sat up on the bed like he was suddenly interested in the conversation. Holland hissed, you could have just talked to me. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. I wanted to list every time I had tried. But I didn't. I said I did. Rhodes stood and stretched like he owned the air. Then he smiled, slow and calm, like this was all funny. It's fine, he said. I'll just leave earlier. Problem solved. Holland glared at me like I'd humiliated her. Then she climbed into bed and turned her back to the room. Rhodes didn't leave early. He stayed. He waited until the lights were off and the room was quiet. Then he whispered to Holland, not quiet enough. She's trying to get rid of me, he said. Holland whispered back, I know. My stomach twisted. I stared at the darkness above my bed and kept my breathing even. Rhodes continued, I told you, she hates me. Holland said, I'll handle it. I realized something then. Holland wasn't trapped by him. She was choosing him. And the second I accepted that, my guilt started to disappear. The next day, I expected Rhodes to be gone. At least for a little while. People get scared when rules are mentioned. They lay low. But by afternoon, he was back, carrying a grocery bag like a roommate coming home with dinner. He walked in while I was sitting at my desk, and he didn't even glance at Holland first. He looked straight at me. He said, you went to the RA? I kept my voice calm. I didn't let my eyes widen. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a flinch. I said I wanted the guest policy clear. That's all. Rhodes smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. He stepped closer to my desk, lowering his voice like he was being friendly, like he was giving advice. You know, he said housing doesn't like troublemakers either. Then he walked past me like he'd just brushed lint off my sleeve, and he sat on Holland's bed. I sat there frozen, my hands cold on my keyboard. He hadn't threatened me, not technically, but the message was loud. I waited until they left for dinner. Then I opened my drawer and pulled out my housing paperwork again. I stared at the guest policy printed in black ink, all those neat rules that were supposed to protect students like me. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I wrote a short email to the housing office from my phone. I kept it simple. I stated facts. Overnight guest for weeks. Repeated requests ignored. Loud late nights. Door slam incident. My belongings disturbed. Feeling unsafe. I attached nothing yet. I hit save as draft. Not sent. Just waiting. When Holland and Rhodes came back, they were laughing. Holland was smiling again, like my discomfort was a small inconvenience she'd decided to ignore. Rhodes carried his bag like he belonged here. He went straight to the wall where our key hooks were, the little plastic rack that came with the room, and he casually reached toward it. My key card wasn't there anymore. I'd stopped leaving it out, but his hand still moved like he expected to find it. He paused. For the first time, his mask slipped, just for a second. Then he turned to me, still smiling, and said, hey, did you move your key? My pulse jumped because he wasn't asking as a friend. He was checking what access he'd lost. I looked at him and said, yeah, I keep it on me now. Rhodes nodded slowly. Holland didn't even look up from from her phone. Then Rhodes reached into his pocket and pulled out a key card. Not mine, not Holland's, a different one. He tapped it against his palm like it was nothing and said, "Doesn't matter, I've got my own anyway." And in that instant, I realized he had never been relying on Holland's permission to be here. He had already found another way in. My mouth went dry. Rhodes held that extra key card like it was a magic trick, like the punchline to a joke I wasn't allowed to laugh at. He kept tapping it against his palm, soft, patient, like he had all the time in the world and I was the one rushing. Holland finally looked up. Her eyes widened just a little, then narrowed, like she was trying to decide whether to act surprised or act loyal. "Where did you get that?" she asked, half whispering. Rhodes shrugged. "A friend. Don't freak out. Don't freak out." I stared at that card and felt something click into place. Of course he had one. Of course he'd planned for this. He didn't just want to stay over. He wanted access. He wanted to come and go without asking anyone. Not Holland, not me, not the building. I forced my voice to stay even. "That's not okay." Rhodes smiled again, slow and lazy. "It's just a card, Maggie." He said my name like we were close, like he had the right. Holland snapped, "Don't call her that." Rhodes held up both hands in surrender, but the look on his face was pleased. He loved the friction. He loved watching us pull at each other while he sat in the middle like a spider. I didn't argue. I didn't lecture. I didn't demand he hand it over, because I could see where this would go. He would deny. Holland would defend him. I would get emotional. They would label me dramatic. Instead, I said one word, quiet as a breath. "Okay." Rhodes tilted his head, like he didn't expect that. I turned back to my desk, opened my laptop, and clicked through a homework document like nothing had happened. My hands were steady on the outside. On the inside, my heart was beating so hard it felt like it could bruise my ribs. That night, I waited. I waited for the moment they'd forget I was a person with thoughts. For the moment they'd get comfortable again. It didn't take long. Rhodes started acting like he'd won. He left his backpack by the door. He tossed his hoodie on my chair again. He walked to the bathroom with a towel slung over his shoulder like he lived in the building. And Holland somehow looked relieved. Like she didn't have to choose between us if she pretended there was no problem. When the lights went off, I lay in bed with my face turned toward the wall, and I listened. I heard Rhodes whisper to Holland. It was low, but not low enough. "She's backing off," he said. "Told you. You just had to stand firm." Holland whispered, "I don't want this to be a war." Rhodes laughed quietly. "It's not a war. It's a test. If she makes it a problem, she's the problem." I felt my eyes sting, not because I was sad, but because my body was trying to release pressure any way it could. They talked about me like I was a malfunctioning appliance. I kept still. I kept breathing. Then I heard something that made my whole body go cold. Rhodes said, "Tomorrow when she's in class, I'm going to grab my stuff from her drawer. She's been hoarding the good chargers anyway." Holland said, "Don't touch her things." Rhodes's voice turned sweet. "Relax. It's not stealing. It's borrowing. She won't even notice." Holland didn't answer, and that silence was the loudest part. In the morning, I moved like I was on autopilot. Shower, clothes, coffee. I smiled at Holland like nothing was wrong. I nodded at Rhodes like he was a piece of furniture. I grabbed my backpack and left, but I didn't go to class. I walked to the library, found a quiet corner, and pulled up my draft email to housing. My fingers hovered over the screen. I thought about all the times I'd told myself I was overreacting. I thought about my memory box on the floor. I thought about the door slam. I thought about that key card. Then I did the quietest revenge I could think of. I didn't send the email yet. I forwarded it to myself as a copy, so the timestamp would exist. And then I added one line at the bottom. "I have reason to believe he has unauthorized access to the building." Then I saved it again. After that, I went to Rue's room. She opened the door with a tired smile, like she'd already had a long day and it wasn't even noon. I stepped inside and kept my voice calm. "I need to file an official report." Rue didn't look surprised. She just nodded slowly and said, "Okay, tell me what changed." I told her everything. The tape on my drawer, the moved papers, the key card, the comments about troublemakers, the late night whisper about taking my things. Rue's face tightened when I mentioned the key card. She stood up immediately. "Do you know if that card is his or if he took it?" she asked. I shook my head. "I just know it isn't mine or Holland's, and he said he got it from a friend." Rue grabbed a notebook and started writing. Then she said, "I'm going to contact the hall director and housing today, and I want you to do something for me." My stomach flipped. Rue looked at me carefully. "If you can, go back to your room at a normal time and act normal. Do not confront him. Do not accuse him. If there's any chance he will show that key card again, we need to document it." I nodded. Rue added, "If you feel unsafe at any point, you leave. You go somewhere public. You call me. You call campus safety. You do not stay in that room alone with him." For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was taking me seriously. I walked out of Rue's room and went back to the library for an hour, waiting until I knew Holland and Rhodes would be deep in their routine. Then I went back. The hallway was quiet. My key card beeped when I tapped it at the door, and the sound made my skin prickle. I pushed the door open and stepped inside like I belonged there, because I did. Holland wasn't there. Rhodes was. He was sitting at my desk with my chair pulled close, and my desk drawer was open. Not cracked, open. My charger cord was stretched across the desk, and his phone was plugged in. My laptop stand was propping his phone up again like a trophy. He turned his head slowly when I walked in, like he was caught and also like he didn't care. "Oh, hey," he said casually. "Thought you had class." I looked at the drawer. I looked at my charger. I kept my face blank. I said, "I forgot something." Rhodes leaned back in my chair. He didn't move away from my desk. He didn't close the drawer. He just watched me like he wanted to see if I'd flinch. Then he said, "Your stuff is always everywhere. Hard to tell what's yours." The audacity of it made my hands tremble, but I kept them still by gripping the strap of my backpack. I took one slow step toward my desk, then another. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I reached into my backpack and pulled out my own charger, the one with my name on it, and I held it up. "My name's on it," I said softly, "so you can tell." Rhodes' smile twitched. He glanced down at the charger already plugged in. The old one, the bait. He realized too late that I'd set a trap. He shrugged and unplugged it. "Whatever. Chill out." Then he did something that made my stomach drop again. He reached into his pocket and pulled out that extra key card, the one he'd shown last night, and he flicked it between his fingers like a coin. "You gonna run and tell again?" he asked lightly. My heart was pounding so hard it almost hurt, but my voice stayed calm. I said no. Rhodes paused like he expected anger. I stepped closer and pointed at the open drawer, the charger, and the key card in his hand. I asked one small question, the kind that sounds innocent and ruins everything. "Why do you have a key card that isn't yours?" Rhodes's smile froze. His eyes narrowed. He looked at me like he was deciding whether I was worth the effort. Then he said, "I told you. A friend. It's not a big deal." I nodded slowly. "Okay." And because I had practiced this in my head 100 times, I did not argue. I simply turned my phone screen toward him. I had already hit record the moment I walked in. Rhodes stared at the phone, and for the first time, his confidence cracked. He straightened in my chair. "You're recording me?" he snapped. I kept my voice low. "I'm recording my own room." Rhodes stood up fast enough that the chair scraped the floor. His tone sharpened. "Turn it off." I didn't move. Rhodes took one step toward me, and my whole body screamed to back up, but I stayed planted. My voice stayed calm because I knew calm would make him reveal himself. I said, "I'm going to ask again. Why do you have that key card?" Rhodes's face reddened. He looked toward the door, then back at me. His hand tightened around the card. Holland walked in right then. She froze in the doorway. Looking at the open drawer, the chair pushed back. Rhodes standing too close to me. "What's going on?" she asked, already defensive. I turned my phone slightly so she could see it too. I didn't accuse. I didn't yell. I said he was in my drawer, and he's holding a key card that doesn't belong to either of us. Holland's eyes flicked to the card. Her mouth opened, then closed. Rhodes cut in fast. "She's being crazy. She's recording me. She's trying to get me kicked out." Holland stared at me, hurt flashing across her face like I'd stabbed her. "Why are you doing this?" I kept my voice steady. "Because I live here, and I deserve to feel safe." Holland's eyes filled with tears, and for a second I almost felt sorry. Then I remembered the silence last night, the part where she didn't stop him. I walked past them and out into the hallway. My hands were shaking when I knocked on Rue's door, but I didn't have to say much. Rue opened it, looked at my face, and immediately stepped into the hall. "Is he in the room right now?" she asked. I nodded. Rue pulled out her phone and made a call right there. Her voice was calm, professional, clipped. She didn't sound like an RA anymore. She sounded like someone who had done this before. Within minutes, the hall director arrived with a campus safety officer. They didn't bang on the door. They didn't make a scene. They just walked in like they belonged, because they did. I stood in the hallway while it happened, my back against the wall, my phone still recording from my pocket. I heard Rhodes talking fast. I heard Holland crying. I heard the hall director's voice, firm and steady, asking for the key card. Then everything got quiet. The hall director stepped out and looked at me. She said, "Thank you for reporting this. That key card was reported missing last month. We are taking it back now." My skin went cold all over again. Missing. So it wasn't a friend. It was stolen. Rhodes was escorted out of the building. Not dragged, not tackled, just walked out, face tight, eyes hard, like he couldn't believe a door had finally closed on him. Holland didn't speak to me that night. She sat on her bed with her face turned toward the wall, shoulders shaking, like she was mourning something. Part of me wanted to comfort her. The old part. The part that wanted peace more than truth. But I didn't. I packed an overnight bag and asked housing for an emergency room change. Not because I was running away, but because I refused to keep living in a place where my safety was treated like a negotiation. Housing approved it by the next morning. On my last trip back to the room, Holland finally spoke. Her voice was raw. "You ruined my life," she whispered. I looked at her. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I said no, he did. I just stopped pretending. As I zipped my suitcase, my eyes fell on my memory box under the bed. The tape I'd placed on it weeks ago was still smooth, still unbroken. And that's when the final twist hit me. Clean and sharp. Rhodes hadn't opened it that night. Holland had. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't need to. Her guilt was already sitting in the room with her, heavier than any boyfriend. I lifted my suitcase, walked to the door, and paused with my hand on the handle. Holland's voice cracked behind me. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." I turned just enough to meet her eyes. I said it didn't get far. It got honest. Then I walked out, and the door closed so softly it barely made a sound, but it was the loudest silence I'd ever owned.